This is not a video about my tornado. This is a video that's a bit more serious in nature. There was a car crash in Schoharie, New York, which is, probably 40 or so miles north of Albany. I should have looked it up, but that's not the point. It was a tragic car crash. 17 people in the limousine, plus the driver and two pedestrians that were in the wrong place at the wrong time. But there's been a ton of speculation on the news as to why the vehicle crashed. It was given a not safe for the road sticker, and apparently the vehicle that subsequently was inspected, but New York keeps a very tight rein on how vehicles are inspected. Not as bad as Vermont, which takes pictures. But one thing I haven't heard, and something else someone just mentioned on the internet, was that there was a loud exhaust noise, which might have meant carbon monoxide poisoning, but I don't think the people died of that. It's purely speculative, but one thing I have not read, and I listen to NPR on my little portable radio all day long, every NPR station, and I haven't heard anything mentioned about rusty brake lines. And if you live anywhere in the Rust Belt, which is from North Carolina all the way to Iowa, wherever they put road salt down. North Carolina has mountains, they put road salt in the winter. South Carolina doesn't, so stuff in South Carolina has no rust. North Carolina, right above it, stuff could be rusty. New York State is very big in the north. They put a lot of road salt down. In the south, not nearly as much. But after 10 years, and especially after 15 years, that was a 2001 excursion. It may have had low mileage because maybe it was only used in the summer. But if it's driven on a salty road, the brake lines are going to rust. So I've got here a 2002 Toyota Tundra from Erie, Pennsylvania. And the story of this isn't relevant, but it is. This is a rust bucket, but look at the body. Original paint, and there's no rust on it. Just minimal rust. Minimal. And it's an original paint job, so there's nothing that has been touched up. But here's a brake line that I pulled off, and I'm sure this has been inspected on that Lincoln excursion. Again, this is purely speculative. Look at this brake line I pulled off of this Toyota. It's got some type of maybe Teflon or some type of coating, and you can't coat the brake line to the fitting because the fitting has to turn. So these manufacturers, let's see that focus, whether it's Toyota or Honda or GM or whatever, put this coating on, but if 99% of the brake line is not rusty, but 1% is, that 1% is right there. And this is an original 15 or so year old brake line. It would be nice if it focused so you could see what I'm talking about, because nobody wants to see a blurry picture. This brake line is about to pop. And what's crazy, ironic, is this vehicle was serviced by a Toyota dealer just before it made the trip here. And the Toyota dealer wouldn't change the frame because it was past the 12-year frame change. But they did put on brand new brake lines to the back. And you can just see them right there. They're brand spanking new. But they didn't change them to the front. Look at this one. Rotted. And I changed this one here that runs to the caliper, and this is from the other side. Again, this is speculative on my part, but you'd think that since anybody that drives a vehicle over 10 years old, which is generally not anybody that has any money, look at that brake line there. That one wasn't too bad, but I had to change this brake line here, and where did it end up? On the ground somewhere. Look at this brake line. This is the new one that I made. And this old one is rotted. And these pop. And you can have 100% brakes. And the next time you push the brake pedal down, which unfortunately in the case of that Lincoln excursion stretched limo, might have been at the middle of that hill when the guy was putting the brakes on to stop, and you pop a brake line with a tiny pinhole and the oil sprays out and you've got zero brakes. These vehicles since 1967, in the case of Cadillac and Rambler 1963 or 64, have dual circuit brakes. So in the late 80s or 90s, they split it up to have one front brake, one back brake, but you've got 10% brakes or 20% brakes, and that was a stretched limo, and those 20% brakes will stop you on flat ground. They're not going to stop anything going downhill, stretched limo or otherwise. But this is my speculation as to why the brakes failed, and this would be a better video if it focused. But that is a rotted brake line, and I have seen them on every vehicle from Cadillac to Volkswagen to Mercedes, you name it, they rot. That's just my speculation as to what happened. The brake line can be 100%, all along its length, but where that coating ends, and these are galvanized brake lines, hot dipped galvanized, they still rot after 10 years. These are galvanized brake lines. After 1 or 2 years, they start getting corrosion, and even aluminum corrodes. Painted surfaces corrode, undercoated vehicles corrode. I have fluid film vehicles with fluid film rust proofing, and I noticed that it does not stick adequately to the galvanized surface, like possibly the brake backing plates. These are brand new ones. The old ones were rotted to nothing. And that's the case. Here's a brake line bracket that's rotted, but the brake line bracket has no relevance. But a brake line holding hundreds of pounds of pressure just pops a tiny pinhole and you lose 90% of your brakes, which in the case of a stretch limo going downhill with 17 or 18 people in it, good luck stopping. You've got no brakes. And they'll probably figure that out eventually. I'd just be curious to know what the outcome was and how the people died exactly. Blunt force trauma or asphyxiation from carbon monoxide or a combination, but just what a tragedy. And all because the manufacturers don't switch to stainless steel brake lines, which have been available for the aftermarket. Restored cars, classic cars, you can get pre-bent stainless steel brake lines, obviously a premium over galvanized or Teflon coated, but they literally last 100 years. And why don't they put them on cars? Why haven't they done it since the 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s or 80s or 90s? Because there's no government law. Big Gov has to create a law that insists on stainless steel gas components, which is the gas filler neck, the gas tank, which could be plastic, the gas pump area, the top of the gas tank, the fuel lines, everything needs to be stainless steel. That's important. Certain things don't really matter, but certain things do. Look at this Toyota. Frame was rotted. Toyota had a 12-year free frame replacement program, but this vehicle is 13 years old, and my buddy that bought it got sucked in. Everything's rotted on it, including the brake lines, the gas tank, the gas lines, the frame, everything. So that's my speculation. It's an unfortunate disaster, tragedy, and maybe it'll lead to new rules, more Big Gov, insisting on stainless steel brake lines and gas lines and gas tank components. It's a must. It's imperative. They've had dual master cylinders and side marker lamps since the mid-late 60s. Why don't they have stainless steel brake lines and fuel lines to prevent and possibly put an end to these disasters, these tragedies? My heartfelt feelings and sympathies to their family. Again, those are just my thoughts. I'm going to bleed this brake system now, and hopefully this vehicle will have a safe braking system. Thanks for watching.